Welcome friends to another Ask Reddit video. In this video, there's gonna be some great answers to a great question, but the only question I have to ask is could you hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? It really helps support the channel. And the question of the day is by Literally Eckham. What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? Let's get into it. Our first answer comes from Academic Bar 9792. Here's an I was that family story. My godmother, who was practically an aunt, ran a fairly successful daycare out of her home in the 90s. She was a first-generation immigrant to the US whose parents came to the New England area from Ireland. My two younger brothers and I spent a lot of time at her home, and I was generally the oldest child there. When I was about 8 years old, she started to have me make her favorite drink, gin and tonic. She drank these all day while running her home daycare. At age 8, I knew how to mix cocktails, that forks were better for stirring than spoons, and that large plastic bottles of gin were cheap and low quality. This went on for years, on pretty much a daily basis until my family moved out west. My godmother kept her daycare running until she died, I'm sure of health problems relating to alcohol. I was 15 when she passed and I'm in my 30s now. I honestly went most of my life thinking nothing of it until I became a father a couple of years ago, at which point I was like, how the freak did anyone let her have a daycare? Side note, I drink but would consider myself an average drinker, if not below average. With that being said, I could never stomach the thought of gin and didn't try gin until I was 30. This was because I once licked my finger early in my daycare bartending career after a couple of drops of gin splashed on my hand as I was pouring. That plastic half-gallon quality gin was the worst thing I'd ever tasted in my life, and I had no idea how my godmother liked it so much. Completely ruined my taste for gin at 8. So I think the phrase, my daycare bartending career, is equally the best and worst thing to hear at the same time. Do you think there would ever be a situation where it would be okay for a kid to make or mix an alcoholic drink for an adult, regardless of the relationship between the adult and kid? Like, let's say a dad supervises it. Would that ever be okay in your book? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next answer is by Flowers and Chocolate. When I was in about first grade, my best friend at the time had a lot of temper tantrums. We were having a sleepover and I fell asleep in her bedroom. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a different bed with her father. I was so confused, but he explained that she had a temper tantrum and her mom went to sleep in her bed with her, so they moved me to the guest room. I was young and didn't understand that it's not normal that he was sleeping in the same bed as me, just him and me. I told my parents when I went home the next day, and they were extremely concerned, asking me if he touched me, etc. I was highly confused because my pure innocent mind didn't understand the concept of that. Now as an adult, I'm like, why didn't they just move me to the other room? Why did the dad have to get in the bed with me? They're truly good people and nothing happened, but it's weird. Yeah. Unlike the last question, I don't think I need to ask if it's okay for this to ever happen. They might be good people, but that is not okay. Honestly, that's the kind of stuff that when growing up and coming into your own and having some reflection, you might be concerned and get stressed out wondering, did something happen? That is definitely not okay. Our next answer is by DrDingling. I remember one time I was at my friend's house in middle school and we were watching TV. It was a sitcom. Everything this entire family laughed at during the show was not funny at all. They would all burst out laughing and I would look over at them confused, trying to figure out what was so hilarious. Then something would happen in the show and I would laugh and none of them found it funny. I know a lot of humor is cultural. They seem to be presenting themselves as a normal middle-class type of family. At one point, their sense of humor was so weird, I thought they might be some sort of spies. It's hard to explain without an example. It's like if someone started bursting out with laughter at the setup of a joke. It's like them bursting out into laughter at knock knock. Whereas for me, it would be knock knock, who's there, who, I think there's an owl in here. That's where the laughs would be. It's like their timing was off or something. I didn't want to be judgmental about their humor. I thought maybe it was a threshold issue. Maybe they thought everything was funny. No, they didn't think what I thought was funny at all either. They seemed so confused too. Definitely a very cultural thing, I think. In the best way possible, I think this means the family's very close. because to me it seems like they all know what their humor is, whether that to the rest of us seems like nothing at all. It's something that cracks all of them up, so they must have some kind of connection that they've grown over the years as they've kind of grown up together. Our next answer is by Revolutionary Sugar 6, more of a date story. I was on a date with a guy who was cooking dinner for me, and his dog took a giant horse pee in the living room. I jumped up, a bit panicked, trying to get the guy's attention to what just happened. The guy didn't even look up when he said, "Oh yeah, she does that sometimes." And that was it. I asked him if there was a towel and disinfectant I could use to clean it up, and the guy says, "I'll just throw some Febreze on it after dinner." I suddenly realized the musty smell I noticed earlier wasn't from his cool and rustic cabin being under a canopy of trees, or that the floor in the same location that bowed when you stepped over it was because it was old. Ate dinner at a table that was a couple feet away from the dog toilet. Left. Freaking gross. I'm a big-time dog lover. I've had dogs all my life. I would never let them pee on the floor inside. I don't care if it's a house, if it's an apartment, dogs are extremely trainable to be housebroken, regardless of the situation. That dude being that nonchalant about their dog peeing all over their floor? Holy moly, if that isn't the biggest pass to say, "I'm out of here," I don't know what is. Our next story is by Paulo Wallo. Went with a few friends to one of their family's houses for a birthday party when I was like 15 or 16. We smoked weed, swam, and had a great old time. After eating, we settled in to watch a horror movie, and at some point, I looked around me and everyone in that family was sitting in the same crisscross applesauce position and slowly rocking back and forth while watching TV. Definitely not the weirdest thing on this thread by far, but something about it was extremely creepy. They were nice as heck though. And in that moment, as you look around, to your left, to your right, people sitting crisscross applesauce slowly rocking back and forth. You ask yourself, am I in a cult right now? I'm gonna attribute this to the same thing as the comedy story from earlier. Probably a really weird behavior that's just kind of enforced by everybody in that family all doing it together. Considering it was during a horror movie, it was probably some kind of coping mechanism. Sitting in that position and rocking back and forth, maybe that made them feel a little bit more comfortable. Kind of a learned mechanism from just being around each other and doing that at the same time, I guess. Our next answer is by Ferrari Guy 1970. I had a friend in high school. We're still friends today, actually. His mom was a hoarder. There were little pathways throughout the house, but it was filled from floor to ceiling with junk. In the hallway to the bedrooms, she had stacked every newspaper she ever got. They were tied up in bundles. When you walked in that hallway, he would caution to not touch the papers, because if a row fell, it would take a couple hours to dig yourself out. Hoarder houses are like, at the same time, the coolest, the weirdest, and also probably the most disgusting places you'll ever see. As long as it wasn't a very, very disgusting one, I feel like it would be probably kind of cool to be able to just kind of walk through and see what is actually inside these places. The problem I've seen though from hoarder houses is it's always like, there's that one spot, maybe the kitchen, where like there's just rags and dirty dishes and bottles and roaches and stuff. I would assume most of them are probably kind of disgusting places to be around, but it would be kind of cool just to see what's in there. Our next answer is by Minx 2016. 15 years ago, visit a friend's house who lives in San Francisco around 3rd Street. Bad neighborhood area. Upon entering, pass by the kitchen, 4 gas stove flame was in full blast, not cooking anything, no vent. You can literally see a big burn hole in the ceiling all the way through the 2nd floor room. His mom was upstairs, one of those rooms far away from the bottom floor kitchen, watching TV in full blast. Long story short, they're basically using their gas stove as a centralized heater for the whole house. I'm a certified fire safety director at my work. This almost gives me a heart attack. You know, I'm not one of those fancy constructor type people, but I don't think you should have a burn hole all the way through multiple floors. Strikes me as odd, strikes me as peculiar, strikes me as probably not a safe thing. I think the worst part is not that the family are doing this, but it's in San Francisco, so it's probably an apartment, if not an apartment, probably very close to other places, to other houses. If that place catches on fire, and believe me, they've got burn holes in the floors, it's not that far away, that could be deadly to a lot more people than just that immediate family. Our next answer is by Relative Economics 17. So when I was younger, my dad died. My mom remarried and had 2 kids. I was moved into the basement. Unfinished basement. I didn't think anything of it since I was 10. I had a sheet blocking my area from the laundry area. It had bare concrete walls, wood beams and piping across the ceiling, and cement flooring. Used a heater and a dehumidifier because it was cold and humid. When I used the heater, my parents would make my sheeted area around my bed, so it would heat up my space quicker. Parents didn't allow any of my friends over, and my brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. Distant family members also never stayed over, and when we had family gatherings, I was told to go into the guest room instead of my room while they were there. I thought, cool, I have a huge room and no one can mess it up. My family would go on vacations yearly without me from when I was 12 till I was 18. I was the dog and house watcher. During one of those vacations when I was 17, I invited a friend to come over. They pointed out how messed up it was that there were bedrooms fully furnished with TVs for my brother and sister, a guest room fully furnished as well with a TV, and how I was in the basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it because it was normal to me. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out that the family trips that I didn't go on were paid for with money that I was getting from my dad passing away. I'm sure I got some of the money in food and clothes and whatever I needed, but it's got me pretty messed up because my brother and sister don't have any memory of it, and when I talk about it, they always back my parents by saying they were raised right, and I opted out of vacations. They also thought the guest room was my room. Is OP like Harry Potter or something? I guess at the baseline, I think it's just good that OP was okay in the scenarios. Like, yes, it is absolutely disgusting what they did and a total mind freak to look back on it. But at least when growing up in that situation, OP wasn't feeling remorse or feeling neglected or disappointed with their settings. I don't know if OP is doing anything about it or can do anything about it, but it's just a tough thing to have to look back on. Our next answer is by Traditional I4686. Went to a sleepover at this girl's house, and her mom was obsessively taking pictures of us all night. At one point, we were watching a movie and my friend passed out, and her mom, I kid you not, pulls out a huge newscast type heavy-duty camera and starts recording her daughter sleeping for a solid 5 minutes. I have trouble sleeping, and so that night when us kids were in the bedroom to sleep, I was on the floor, just staring at the wall in the dark. I was facing away from the door, laying on my side. I hear the door creak, some footsteps, and then the darkness of the room lit with a sudden flash. I got up just in time to see the door close. I know it was her mom taking pics of us. The weirdest part to me is that it was about 3 a.m. when that happened, meaning the girl's mom either had an alarm or just stayed up that late and wait. It's one thing to document stuff about your kid's life growing up, maybe taking photos of a sleepover or even videos would be great to look back on. 5 minutes when they're sleeping, okay, maybe. 3 a.m. when everybody's sleeping? No, learn some boundaries. That's just too much. And our final answer of the day is by Armicist8175. My family were very comfortable, and my mom always babysat lots of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically, her place was just where the kids hung out. Once, there was an emergency with my dad, and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight, and I wound up with one of the families that she babysat for. They were really nice people, and I was close friends with their kids, obviously, because they were at my house every day. It was a new experience, though. This was the first time I'd ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and I didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilet didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point that it was piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid, and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. I think the biggest takeaway here is that OP not only got to kind of experience what life was like in those situations, but they realized that their mom is such a saint. willingly taking those kids in and feeding them when they don't have to. They didn't have to do that. Hopefully it inspired more of that kinds of behavior in OP. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.